The first wolf pup disappeared beneath the frozen lake before the Omega could even reach it. Then a second one slipped beneath the black ice, then a third. 6 helpless pups were drowning, and every warrior on the shore was too afraid to move. But the Omega stepped onto the cracking ice anyway. She had no weapon, no strength, and no idea that someone far more powerful was listening. Because every scream, every breath, and every heartbeat she made was traveling through an ancient pack bond straight to the Alpha King. And when he finally heard her last cry, he rode into the storm. The first pup vanished beneath the black ice before Lyra could even scream. One moment, 6 tiny shapes were huddled together in the shattered opening of Moonwater Lake, their white breath rising into the frozen morning air. The next, the smallest disappeared with a soft splash, leaving only 2 frightened paws clawing at the edge. Another slipped after it. Then another. Across the lake, people stood frozen. No one moved. No one dared. The ice was too thin. Lyra knew that better than anyone. She had spent enough winters gathering herbs along the northern forest to know how quickly Moonwater Lake could turn from solid ground into a grave. The surface looked hard beneath the pale morning light, but dark lines ran beneath the snow like cracks in old glass. Then she heard the scratching. It was faint at first, almost lost beneath the wind. Lyra turned her head, one hand still wrapped around the small basket hanging from her arm. Snowflakes drifted through her dark hair. The hem of her grey wool dress was already damp from the morning frost. She listened. There it was again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Her eyes moved toward the center of the lake. 6 wolf pups. Trapped. Her heart seemed to stop. Please. The word left her lips without sound. A deep crack suddenly rolled across the lake. People on the distant shore shouted. Lyra did not. She stepped forward. The first patch of ice groaned beneath her boot. She stopped. For one heartbeat, every sensible thought inside her told her to turn around. The pups were not hers. She was an Omega. She had no warrior training, no strong wolf, no protective family waiting behind her. If the ice broke, no one could reach her in time. But then one of the pups cried. It was a tiny sound. Weak. Terrified. Lyra closed her eyes. She remembered being that small. She remembered winter nights when the other Omegas had taken the warm blankets and left her with a thin cloth near the kitchen fire. She remembered being told that weakness was something the world punished. She remembered learning not to ask for help. Her eyes opened. She stepped onto the lake. The ice gave a low, painful groan. Lyra swallowed. Easy. Her voice trembled, but she kept moving. The wind pushed against her shoulders as she crawled rather than walked, spreading her weight across the surface. Her fingers were already numb by the time she reached the first broken section. The pup was gone. For one horrible second, there was nothing beneath the black water except drifting snow. Then a tiny white paw appeared. Lyra plunged her arm into the freezing opening. Pain exploded through her fingers. She gritted her teeth. Her hand found wet fur. The pup twisted desperately. Lyra pulled. The ice cut into her wrist. She pulled harder. The tiny body came free with a gasp, and she immediately pressed the trembling animal against her chest. The pup weighed almost nothing. That frightened her more than the ice. You're right. She wrapped part of her cloak around it. Behind her, another cry rose from beneath the lake. Lyra looked up. 5 remained. She crawled forward. And far beyond the mountains, where black pine forests surrounded the royal road, a great grey horse suddenly stopped beneath its rider. King Kaelen lifted his head. His guards nearly collided with him. The Alpha King had heard something. Not with his ears. Through the ancient bond connecting every wolf beneath his crown, a single feeling had entered his mind. Pain. Fear. And beneath both, the desperate determination of someone who refused to let another creature die. Kaelen's fingers tightened around the reins. His horse stamped against the snow. Where? The king looked toward the distant mountains. For the first time in years, something inside the pack bond had awakened that he could not explain. And somewhere beyond those mountains, an Omega was walking onto breaking ice. Kaelen had been riding since sunrise. The royal hunting party had been traveling toward the eastern border when the sensation struck him so suddenly that his horse nearly reared beneath him. Pain. Cold. Water. A woman's heartbeat pounding against his own mind. He had experienced the pack bond thousands of times. He had felt wounded warriors. He had sensed wolves calling for their mothers. He had shared the final moments of dying soldiers. But this was different. This was not a normal pack call. It was raw, uncontrolled, human. The king closed his eyes. The sensation came again. A desperate gasp. Then silence. His eyes opened. Moonwater Lake. Captain Roran stared at him. My king. Turn north. The guards exchanged confused looks. Kaelen was already moving. His horse surged forward, hooves throwing snow into the air. The farther they traveled, the stronger the strange connection became. Then another burst of pain struck his chest. Kaelen nearly lost his grip on the reins. He could feel cold water. He could feel fingers that were beginning to lose their strength. He could feel fear. But beneath it was something stronger. A refusal. Someone was refusing to let go. At Moonwater Lake, Lyra had already rescued the second pup. Her dress was soaked almost to her waist. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her hands were bleeding where the broken ice had torn her skin. She barely noticed. The second pup lay beneath her cloak, trembling against the first. Four remained. Lyra stared at them. The lake groaned. A long crack raced beneath her knees. She flinched. The crack stopped less than a hand's width from her. For a moment she could hear nothing but her own breathing. Then the largest pup cried. Lyra moved again. She reached the third cub. The ice broke. Her leg plunged through. Cold water swallowed her thigh. She gasped and caught herself with both hands. The pup slipped away. No. She reached. Her fingers closed around its hind leg. The water pulled downward. Lyra's shoulder screamed. She pulled with everything she had. The pup came free. She dragged herself backward across the ice, clutching it beneath her coat. 3. Only 3 more. But the lake was getting worse. The wind had risen. Snow swept across the surface. And Lyra's body was losing heat. She could no longer feel 2 of her fingers. Still, she crawled forward. On the far shore, frightened villagers had begun to shout for her to stop. Lyra did not turn. She reached the 4th pup. Then the 5th. Each rescue cost her something. A torn palm. A bleeding knee. A breath that became harder to draw. But every time she pulled another pup into her arms, one tiny heartbeat answered hers. That was enough. By the time she reached the 6th, Lyra could barely stand. The final pup was trapped beneath a shelf of ice. Its eyes were open. It was too tired to cry. Lyra's face changed. No. She dropped to her knees. The pup's nose touched the water. Lyra broke the ice with the heel of her hand. Once. Twice. Again. Her knuckles split. The opening widened. She reached inside. Nothing. She reached farther. Her shoulder disappeared beneath the freezing surface. Her lungs burned. Then her fingers touched fur. She grabbed. The pup was heavier than the others because it was soaked through. Lyra pulled. Nothing happened. She pulled again. The ice shifted. A crack thundered beneath her. The entire lake seemed to breathe. Lyra wrapped both arms around the pup and pulled with a strength she did not know she possessed. The cub came free. She collapsed backward. All 6 were alive. For one beautiful moment, there was only silence. 6 tiny bodies beneath her cloak. 6 trembling breaths. Lyra lowered her head. A smile touched her lips. Then she felt the cold. It was inside her now. Her arms stopped responding. Her vision blurred. She tried to rise. Her knees failed. Across the lake, riders appeared through the snow. At their center was a black horse. And on its back sat the Alpha King. Kaelen dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. He crossed the frozen shore at a run. His warriors followed. Then he saw her. An Omega. Half drowned. Bleeding. Barely conscious. Holding 6 royal wolf pups against her chest. Kaelen stopped. The pack bond struck him again. This time he felt exactly what she felt. Exhaustion, relief, and a strange warmth. Not pride, not fear, love. The king stared at the woman who had risked her life for 6 creatures she did not know. Then one of the pups moved. A silver crescent appeared beneath its wet fur. Kaelen's expression hardened. He knew that mark. All 6 pups carried it. They were not ordinary cubs. They were his blood, his heirs. And the woman holding them had just saved the future of the kingdom. Lyra woke to warmth. Real warmth. Not the weak heat of a dying kitchen fire, but the deep warmth of blankets piled around her body and a stone fireplace burning somewhere nearby. She opened her eyes. A wooden ceiling came slowly into focus. For several seconds she did not move. Then she heard breathing. Small breathing. Lyra turned her head. 6 wolf pups were sleeping beside her. They had been wrapped in wool blankets, their bodies pressed close together for warmth. One of them stirred. Its nose touched her wrist. Lyra smiled. She tried to lift her hand. Pain shot through her fingers. She winced. A door opened. An elderly woman entered carrying a bowl of steaming water. She was dressed in the pale robes of a royal healer. "Don't move." Lyra immediately froze. "I'm sorry." The healer frowned. "You nearly died." Lyra looked toward the pups. "Are they alive?" The healer's expression softened. "All 6. Lyra closed her eyes. A breath escaped her. She had not realized she had been holding it. "Thank the moon." The healer placed the bowl beside the bed. "You should be thanking yourself." Lyra shook her head. "They were trapped. And you followed them." "They were crying." The healer looked at her for a long moment. Outside the chamber, footsteps stopped. King Kaelen stood beyond the door. He had not entered. He had spent most of the night trying to understand what had happened. The pack bond should not have carried Lyra's pain to him. Not like that. Only wolves bound to the royal bloodline could reach him with such force. Yet when she had screamed beneath the ice, he had heard her as clearly as if she had stood beside him. He had seen her memories in fragments. A lonely child. Cold rooms. Empty meals. Hands that had pushed her aside. A life built around being useful without ever being valued. And still she had chosen to save 6 lives. Kaelen entered. Lyra immediately tried to sit. The pups woke. The smallest climbed across her blanket and curled against her stomach. Kaelen stared. The king was younger than the legends made him seem, but there was nothing soft about him. Dark hair. Broad shoulders. A scar across one eyebrow. Eyes the color of winter steel. Lyra lowered her gaze. "My king. You don't need to bow." She hesitated. "No one has ever told me that." Kaelen looked at her. Something in those words disturbed him. "What is your name?" "Lyra." "Which pack?" "Frostfang." Kaelen's jaw tightened. He knew Frostfang. They had sent taxes late for 3 winters. There had also been rumors of mistreatment among their Omega servants. "Why were you at the lake?" "Gathering herbs." "And why did you risk your life?" Lyra looked down at the sleeping pups. They were alone. Kaelen had no answer. A soft growl came from the corner. One of the pups had lifted its head. It was staring at the stone wall. Lyra noticed. So did Kaelen. The pup stood. Its ears flattened. It growled again. Kaelen's warriors moved toward the wall. "Search the corridor." The pup suddenly ran to the far side of the chamber and scratched at a section of stone. The sound echoed strangely. Kaelen approached. He pressed his palm against the wall. Cold air touched his skin. "There is a passage." The healer stepped back. The king looked at Lyra. She was staring at the pup. A faint fear had appeared in her eyes. How did it know? Before anyone could answer, a bell rang throughout the fortress. Once. Twice. Then a 3rd time. The sound was not the alarm for fire. It was the alarm for the gates. Kaelen's face changed. He turned toward the door. Who opened them? No one answered. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the fortress, came the heavy sound of iron chains falling. The gates had been opened from the inside, and someone had already entered. The first arrow struck the stone above Kaelen's head. The second shattered a wooden lamp. Darkness swallowed the corridor. Then the fortress erupted. Warriors rushed through the halls as horns sounded from the towers. Boots thundered across stone. Somewhere below, horses screamed. Kaelen moved instantly. Get the pups inside the western chamber. Lyra gathered the 6 cubs. One was weak. Its legs trembled beneath it. She tucked it against her chest. The others followed. Smoke began drifting beneath the doorway. Lyra coughed. The pup in her arms whimpered. She pulled her cloak over its head. Then the door burst open. A masked soldier entered. Lyra backed away. There was nowhere to run. The soldier raised his blade. Before it could fall, a black wolf struck him from the side. The animal crashed into the man, knocking the weapon across the floor. Lyra stared. The wolf turned toward her. It was one of Kaelen's royal guardians. Its teeth were bared. Its eyes were fixed on the doorway. More enemies were coming. Lyra looked at the 6 pups. They were frightened. The smallest began crying. The sound entered her chest. Something strange happened. The world became quiet. Lyra could suddenly feel 6 tiny heartbeats. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Wolves throughout the fortress. She could feel their fear, their anger, their confusion. And beneath all of it, Kaelen. He was fighting somewhere below. She felt his exhaustion, his fury, his determination. Then the smallest pup cried again. Lyra closed her eyes. She did not know what she was doing. She simply held the pup closer. You're safe. The words were barely louder than a whisper. The bond answered. A pulse moved through the fortress. Every wolf stopped. The attackers stopped too. For one impossible second, silence filled the entire mountain. Then the wolves howled. Not 1. Not 10. Hundreds. The sound shook snow from the rooftops. Kaelen looked up from the courtyard. He felt Lyra. Not as pain this time. As warmth. A connection spread through the pack like a fire moving through dry grass. The wolves found one another. The defenders surged forward. The attackers broke. Minutes later, the last enemy fled into the snow. Kaelen stood in the courtyard, breathing heavily. His sword was wet with melted snow. Lord Draven approached. The chief commander looked calm. Too calm. The attackers came through the lower gate, Draven said. Kaelen looked at him. Who guarded it? Draven hesitated. Captain Soren. Soren has guarded that gate for 12 years. He must have been bribed. Kaelen said nothing. His eyes moved toward the tower. Someone had known exactly where to strike. Someone had known about the pups. Someone inside the fortress had betrayed him. Later that evening, while searching the royal archives, the healer discovered something buried inside an ancient record. A name. Lyra's mother. The moon-blessed Omegas had once served the first kings of the north. They were not warriors. They were bond keepers. Their gift was simple. They could awaken trust in frightened wolves. They could calm unstable spirits. And once every several generations, one was born whose bond could reach an entire kingdom. Lyra read the record in silence. Her hands trembled. My mother never told me. Kaelen stood beside her. Perhaps she was trying to protect you. Lyra looked at him. From what? Kaelen had no answer. Because another truth had begun to emerge. The attack had not been about the fortress. It had not even been about him. It had been about the pups. And Lord Draven was no longer in the room. Draven vanished before sunrise. By midday, the kingdom knew the chief commander had betrayed the crown. By evening, scouts reported his forces gathering at the northern pass. He had taken soldiers, horses, supplies, and he was coming for the 6 pups. Kaelen wanted to move the royal family south. But the mountain roads were already blocked. The only remaining route was through the old forest. Lyra knew that forest. She had grown up near it. There was a trail beneath the pines that most people had forgotten. It led to an abandoned sanctuary carved into the mountain. Kaelen did not want to trust an unguarded trail. But when Lyra explained where it led, he saw something in her face. She was afraid. Yet she was not running. She was choosing. They left before dawn. Snow fell steadily as the group entered the forest. Kaelen rode ahead. Lyra walked beside the pups. The smallest refused to leave her side. Every few steps, it looked up. She touched its head. Keep going. Hours passed. The trees grew thicker. The royal fortress disappeared behind them. Then Lyra felt something wrong. The bond weakened. She could no longer feel the warriors clearly. She could barely sense Kaelen. She turned. He was farther behind. Their eyes met through the falling snow. For the first time since the lake, the connection between them felt fragile. Lyra looked away. They continued. At last they reached the sanctuary. Its entrance was hidden behind a wall of ice. Inside, ancient carvings covered the stone. Lyra raised a torch. Her breath caught. A woman was carved into the wall. An omega. Beside her stood 6 wolves. Above them hung a silver moon. Lyra touched the carving. Beneath it was an old symbol. The same crescent carried by the pups. Kaelen entered behind her. What does it mean? Lyra traced the worn letters. It says the 6 will survive only when protected by one who chooses their lives above her own. Kaelen looked at her. Lyra understood. The pups had not simply been rescued by accident. Something had brought them to Moonwater Lake. Something had brought her there too. Then the sanctuary doors closed. Iron chains scraped across stone. Lyra turned. Draven stood outside. His men surrounded the entrance. The commander smiled. You should have stayed at the lake. Kaelen reached for his sword. Draven's archers appeared above the ridge. Your king cannot reach you now. Kaelen stepped forward. The bond between him and Lyra was almost gone. He could feel only fragments. Fear. Cold. A heartbeat. Then silence. Draven's men advanced. Kaelen fought. Steel flashed. Snow turned red. But there were too many. Lyra took the pups and ran deeper into the sanctuary. She reached another chamber. At its center lay a frozen underground lake. No exit. She turned. Draven entered. The 6 pups gathered around her. Lyra backed toward the ice. Draven raised his weapon. Move away from them. Lyra shook her head. The smallest pup stepped in front of her. Then another. Then all 6. Draven laughed. You think 6 pups can protect you? Lyra looked down. Her hands were shaking. But she did not move. She knelt. The pups pressed against her. She closed her eyes. And somewhere across the mountains, every wolf in the kingdom suddenly lifted its head. Lyra's voice entered the pack bond. Not a scream. Not a command. A plea. Help them. The mountains answered. Howls rose from every direction. Kaelen heard the howl. He was lying in the snow. Blood darkened his sleeve. His sword lay several feet away. For a moment, he could not move. Then the bond struck him. Lyra. 6 heartbeats. One desperate plea. His eyes opened. He stood. The wolves around him stood too. One by one. Dozens. Then hundreds. The forest filled with white breath and glowing eyes. Kaelen looked toward the mountain. Find her. The wolves ran. They crossed the snow like a living river. Inside the sanctuary, Draven had taken another step toward Lyra. She held the smallest pup against her chest. The others stood around her. The frozen lake cracked beneath her feet. Draven lifted his blade. Then a howl shook the sanctuary. Another answered. Then another. Draven turned. The stone entrance exploded inward. Kaelen entered. Behind him came the royal wolves. His face was no longer the face of a king defending a throne. It was the face of a man who had finally found what he was willing to lose everything to protect. Draven's soldiers lowered their weapons. Some dropped them entirely. The commander looked around. You cannot arrest me, he said. The kingdom needs someone strong enough to rule. Kaelen walked toward him. No. His voice was quiet. The kingdom needs someone it can trust. Draven attacked. The fight was short. Not because Draven was weak. Because he had already lost. Every soldier who might have protected him had seen the truth. He had betrayed the crown. He had hunted the royal heirs. He had tried to murder an innocent Omega. And he had forgotten one thing. Fear could command wolves for a while. But loyalty could command them forever. Draven was disarmed and taken alive. When the sanctuary finally became quiet, Kaelen turned toward Lyra. She was sitting on the frozen ground. The 6 pups were piled around her. The smallest had fallen asleep against her heart. Kaelen knelt. For a moment neither spoke. Then he reached out. Not for the pups. For her hand. Lyra looked at him. His fingers closed gently around hers. The bond returned. But this time there was no pain. No fear. Only warmth. Months later, the kingdom gathered beneath the great hall's silver banners. Lyra stood beside the throne. She wore no crown. She did not need one. Kaelen placed a silver cloak around her shoulders. From this day forward, he announced, no Omega beneath my crown will be treated as less than a wolf of this kingdom. The hall was silent. Then the wolves began to howl. Lyra looked toward the 6 pups. They were growing stronger every day. One rested its head against her knee. Another slept beneath the table. The smallest followed her everywhere. The kingdom changed slowly. Not overnight. But doors began opening. Omegas were taught healing. They were given places in the royal council. Young wolves were taught that kindness was not weakness. And Moonwater Lake became a place of remembrance. Every winter, people left flowers along its frozen shore. Not for the pups. For the woman who had stepped onto the ice when everyone else was too afraid. Years passed. The 6 pups became 6 enormous wolves. Their silver markings grew brighter beneath the moon. They guarded the northern borders. They slept outside Lyra's chambers. And wherever she walked, they followed. Kaelen changed too. The king who had once spent his life behind walls of duty learned how to sit beside a fire without carrying the weight of the kingdom for a few quiet minutes. Sometimes Lyra found him watching the wolves. Sometimes he watched her. Neither needed to explain what had grown between them. It had not been created by magic. The bond had brought them together. But trust had kept them there. Love had come slowly. Through winter mornings. Through long journeys. Through quiet meals. Through wounds. Through laughter. Through the ordinary moments that mattered more than any prophecy. One winter evening, years after the frozen lake, Lyra returned to Moonwater Lake alone. Snow drifted softly across the shore. The moon reflected on the ice. She stood where the first pup had disappeared. For a moment, she remembered the cold. The fear. The blood on her hands. Then she heard footsteps behind her. 6 pairs. She smiled. The wolves came to her one by one. The largest lowered his head. Lyra placed both hands against his thick silver fur. The youngest pressed against her side. Behind them, Kaelen approached through the snow. He stopped beside her. Neither spoke. Across the frozen lake, moonlight stretched like a silver road. Lyra looked at the 6 wolves. They had once been helpless creatures beneath breaking ice. Now they stood taller than her shoulders. Strong. Loyal. Alive. She remembered something the healer had told her on the first night in the fortress. That she should thank herself. Back then, Lyra had not understood. Now she did. Sometimes courage did not look like a warrior holding a sword. Sometimes it looked like a frightened woman crawling onto thin ice because 6 tiny hearts were still beating beneath it. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness could awaken something powerful enough to cross an entire kingdom. And sometimes, the person who believed she had no place in the world was the one destined to give everyone else a place to belong. Kaelen reached for her hand. She let him take it. The 6 wolves stood around them. Above the mountains, the moon rose higher. And for the first time, Moonwater Lake was not remembered as the place where 6 pups almost died. It was remembered as the place where a kingdom learned what courage truly meant. Because one Omega had stepped onto the ice. She had carried 6 helpless lives back from the darkness. And without knowing it, She had awakened the heart of an Alpha King.